Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, November 19, 2025. President Donald Trump speaks at a U.S. Saudi Arabia investment summit, announcing that Saudi Arabia has been named a major non-NATO ally of the United States, and that visiting Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has encouraged him to help stop the civil war in Sudan. A bill to require the Justice Department to release all documents in the investigation of the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein has officially passed the Senate and is going to President Trump's desk to be signed. Attorney General Pam Bondi says we have released over 33,000 Epstein documents to the Hill, and we will continue to follow the law and to have maximum transparency. House tonight expected to pass a couple of bills, including repealing a law allowing senators to sue the Justice Department for $500,000 if their phones were searched as part of an investigation, including the investigation into the attack on the U.S. Capitol January 6, 2021, and a bill to reinstate cash bail for criminal defendants in the District of Columbia. There's a House hearing today on a bill to ban member of Congress stock trades. Congress examines the federal government shutdown effects on air travel, and First Lady Melania Trump joins Second Lady Usha Vance to visit military families at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina ahead of the holidays. Reuters writing that Saudi and U.S. officials touted billions of dollars in new investments and growing financial ties between the two countries on Wednesday, coinciding with Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's visit to Washington. President Donald Trump said $270 billion in agreements and sales are being signed between dozens of companies. Bin Salman also touted the investment agreements both were signing, and bin Salman rubbed shoulders with many of corporate America's most powerful executives at the event on Wednesday, a day after President Trump reintroduced him to official Washington with a glowing endorsement from the White House. Some of the reporting from Reuters. It was the U.S. Saudi Arabia Investment Summit held at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. President Trump began his speech there by announcing that he's naming Saudi Arabia a major non-NATO ally.
We officially designated the kingdom yesterday as the major non-NATO ally. That's a big deal. That's actually a very big deal. It's a great honor. That happens seldom, very seldom, if at all. So I just want to congratulate you on that. That's a sign of trust. We signed a historic strategic defense agreement yesterday also, and that's something that is likewise very rare, and it's a very honored company that you're in. And we're going to be selling Saudi Arabia some of the greatest military equipment ever built. We build the best military equipment in the world by far. That's why we do the most business, including nearly 300 American-made tanks, is what you're buying, among many other things, the airplanes, and we're working on getting that approved very quickly. It's already approved, but don't worry. We have to go through a process. The process will take, Elon knows, the process will take about, would you say 24 hours? I think so. You're in good shape, very good shape. The partnership between our two nations is among the most consequential in the entire world, and together the Crown Prince and I are making an alliance stronger and more powerful than it's ever been before. We've had good relationships and frankly not good. You didn't have a good relationship with Barack Hussein Obama. You didn't have a good relationship with Sleepy Joe Biden. But you had a great relationship with me, and now it's as good as it was, and probably even better if you think about it, because we took the dark cloud away from your country. It was called Iran and its nuclear capability, and we obliterated that very quickly and strongly and powerfully. But that was a real cloud over the whole Middle East, and now they want to make a deal. They want to make a deal. They want to see if they can work out a deal with us, and we'll be doing that probably. But that was a terrible cloud that you had to live with for a long time.
President Donald Trump at the U.S. Saudi Arabia Investment Summit held at the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in Washington, D.C., announcing that Saudi Arabia is now a major non-NATO ally of the United States. That status was created by Congress in 1987, and before Saudi Arabia, there were 21 countries given that designation, although one, Afghanistan, was effectively rescinded when the government was overthrown. Under President Joe Biden, there were 3: Colombia, Qatar, and Kenya. President Trump today also said that the Saudi Crown Prince has asked him to help solve a civil war in Sudan.
I settled 8 wars, and I'll tell you, His Majesty would like me to do something very powerful having to do with Sudan. It was not on my my charts to be involved in that. I thought it was just something that was crazy and out of control. But I just see how important that is to you and to a lot of your friends in the room. Sudan, and we're going to start working in Sudan. I didn't think that that was one that was going to be so easy to do, but we're going to start working. Mohammed said, yeah, thank you. Thank you to you.
President Trump at the U.S. Saudi Arabia Investment Summit at the Kennedy Center in Washington. Newsweek writing, the conflict in Sudan began in 2023 as a power struggle between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary rapid support forces during what was supposed to be a transition to civilian rule. The fighting has fueled ethnically driven violence, widespread destruction, and mass displacement, drawing in outside actors and raising fears that Sudan could fracture. That was from Newsweek. Al Arabiya and Reuters reporting that members of Congress hosted Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman at the U.S. Capitol on Wednesday on the second day of his visit to Washington. MBS arrived at Congress for a reception hosted by House Representative Speaker Mike Johnson and attended by some Democrats, as well as some of President Trump's fellow Republicans. Leaving the hour-long session with MBS, House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Brian Mast, Republican of Florida, said it had been a fantastic meeting that covered topics from Saudi Arabia's future internally to Israel and Gaza. He told Reuters, we covered just a lot of ground and covered ground with His Royal Highness at the White House last night as well. Again, reporting from Reuters and Al Arabiya. The U.S. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, was at the meeting and asked at his news conference about what was discussed.
Have you met with MBS yet? And if so, what was discussed? And if not yet, will you be?
I was part of the bipartisan meeting hosted by the Speaker this morning. I asked the Crown Prince about his views relative to a just and lasting peace between Israel and the Palestinian people, and his views as it relates to the importance of a two-state solution. The Crown Prince reiterated his view that a one-state solution in Israel is impractical, and that the best path forward, of course, involving the reconstruction of Gaza, is to eventually find a robust path toward a safe and secure Israel, living side by side in peace and prosperity with a Palestinian state. I support that position. I think we'll continue to stand by the special relationship between our two countries. It's incredibly important. But as we move forward to find a path toward a just and lasting peace, ultimately, it has to involve a safe and secure Israel, living side by side in peace and prosperity with a Palestinian state, where the Palestinian people can realize their aspirations for dignity and self-determination. Crown Prince reiterated what he has said publicly, his commitment toward finding that path forward.
And was Jamal Khashoggi mentioned at all in his murder?
It wasn't mentioned in the conversations that I was a part of throughout the meeting.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, meeting with reporters on Capitol Hill. New York Post writing that Saudi Arabia on Wednesday allowed U.S. citizen Saad al-Mahdi to return home to Florida 4 years after he was incarcerated for tweeting mild criticisms of the Riyadh government. The announcement came moments after President Trump delivered a speech touting U.S. Saudi ties during a second day of public events in D.C. with visiting Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the country's prime minister and de facto ruler. The al-Mahdi family said in a statement, "Our family is overjoyed that after 4 long years, our father is finally on his way home to the United States." That was from the New York Post. This is Washington Today. From Politico, the Senate has officially passed legislation forcing the Justice Department to release more information about the case it built against the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Senators had locked in an agreement to automatically pass the bill as soon as it was received from the House, which overwhelmingly passed it on Tuesday. It now heads to President Donald Trump's desk, where he has said he will sign it. Reporting from Politico, Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, Republican from Oklahoma, was presiding over the Senate when the bill passed.
Under the previous order, the Senate, having received from the House H.R. 4405, the Senate will proceed to the consideration of the bill, which the clerk will report.
H.R. 4405, an act to require the Attorney General to release all documents and records in possession of the Department of Justice relating to Jeffrey Epstein and for other purposes.
Under the previous order, the bill is considered read 3 times and passed, and the motion to reconsider is considered, made, and laid on the table.
Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, Republican from Oklahoma, presiding over the Senate, and it was the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, who on Tuesday asked unanimous consent to deem the Epstein Files bill to have passed the Senate when the paperwork arrived from the House, where it passed in the House overwhelmingly with a roll call, and you heard today, deemed passed. Senator Schumer said on the Senate floor today that Democrats will work to ensure the Trump administration adheres to the law once it is signed. 30 days to release all the files.
This is a very important moment for so many people whose lives have been destroyed by Jeffrey Epstein and his circle of abusers and monsters. So I want to thank again all the advocates, the survivors, the victims groups who raised their voices, who spoke courageously about the need for accountability and pushed Congress to take action. It's a shame that so many Republicans, Donald Trump and Republican leaders in Congress, tried for months to prevent the truth from coming out. Republican leaders had to be dragged kicking and screaming to get this bill over the finish line. Left to their own devices, these Republican leaders would have never let the bill see the light of day. But that shows you how powerful this issue is, and shows you when a strong group of people, they may be a small group, but with moral right on their side, with great conviction, they can get to the truth and move that desire forward. But I want to be very clear, the job is not done. The vote is not the end, it's only the beginning. Once the president signs the bill, he must apply and execute it faithfully. There must be no funny business from Donald Trump. He must not use the excuse of frivolous investigations to release some Epstein documents while intentionally hiding others that deserve to be seen by the American public. This is not an invitation for Donald Trump to pick and choose his version of the truth. This bill is a command for the president to be fully transparent, to come fully clean, and to provide full honesty to the American people, even if he doesn't want to. So I want to be clear. Anything less than full transparency will be unacceptable in the eyes of the American people.
Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, the minority leader, today on the Senate floor. Attorney General Pam Bondi was questioned at a news conference at the Justice Department about the Epstein Files release bill, soon to be law.
On the Epstein files, does the new investigation by the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney prevent the department from releasing all of the remaining files?
So we have released over 33,000 Epstein documents to the Hill, and we'll continue to follow the law and to have maximum transparency. Also, we will always encourage all victims to come forward.
What are the next steps, Madam Attorney General, for the DOJ regarding what we assume President Trump will sign into law with the Epstein files? Is this going to be on the Justice Department website? What are you doing here over the next 30 days, as we understand it?
We will continue to follow the law with maximum transparency while protecting victims.
Yeah.
When you say follow the law, Madam Attorney General, do you mean that you will provide all the files by 30 days?
We will follow the law. The law passed both chambers last evening. It has not yet been signed, but we will continue to follow the law, again, while protecting victims, but also providing maximum transparency.
Quick follow-up to that. Madam Attorney General, the DOJ statement earlier this year saying that the files would not release mentioned the fact that the review of the documents and the evidence did not suggest that any additional investigation of third parties was warranted. What changed since then that you launched this investigation?
Information that has come for information. There's information that new information, additional information, and again, we will continue to follow the law, to investigate any leads. If there are any victims, we encourage all victims to come forward, and we will continue to provide maximum transparency under the law.
Ryan Wedding, Madam General. On Ryan Wedding, you mentioned...
Excuse me. Madam Attorney General, the issue with the new information that you just indicated, is the department seeking information perhaps from the Epstein estate because Mr. Blanche did not have that information when he interviewed Ghislaine Maxwell? What new information, and would you limit the new investigation to just those named persons that the president talked about, or is this a broad, open-ended investigation?
I would refer to the Deputy Attorney General's post that he put out on X, and we're not going to say anything else on that because now it is a pending investigation in the Southern District of New York.
Attorney General Pam Bondi at a news conference at the Justice Department today. The news conference not called initially on this topic, but there were questions from reporters about it. She was there to announce charges against a drug cartel leader, Ryan Wedding, for drug trafficking, murder, and money laundering. And the FBI is offering a $15 million reward for the capture of Ryan Wedding. On the Epstein files, New York Times writing about the bill about to be signed into law. The legislation contains several exceptions that are similar to the reasons Attorney General Pam Bondi initially withheld most of the files. Under the legislation, the Trump administration may withhold records that are classified, identify victims, or include images of child sexual abuse. The legislation also allows records to be withheld if they would jeopardize an active federal investigation. Mr. Trump demanded that the Justice Department launch an investigation into Democrats mentioned in some of the emails turned over by the Epstein estate. That was from the New York Times. From ABC News, the House could act as soon as Wednesday to move forward with an effort to strip controversial language in the government funding bill that allows senators to sue the government if their phones are investigated without their knowledge. Meanwhile, Senate Majority Leader John Thune continued to be non-committal about what the Senate will do after the House acts. The provision was inserted at Thune's request, ABC News learned, into the massive government funding bill that passed Congress and was signed into law last week at Thune's request. Again, that was from ABC News. Those lawsuits authorized could be for $500,000. Congressman James Walkinshaw, a Democrat from Virginia, spoke on the House floor today as the bill to repeal it was debated.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of legislation to repeal a last-minute, dead-of-night provision added to the Legislative Branch Appropriations Act that greenlights 8 Republican senators to raid the Treasury and reward themselves with millions of taxpayer dollars because they were investigated for their involvement in the 2021 insurrection. These 8 senators provided support to President Trump's attempt to overturn the results of a free and fair election. It is a brazen attempt by Republicans to further whitewash a conspiracy and a violent insurrection while lining their own pockets with taxpayer dollars. It's a trifecta of the type of corruption that shakes Americans' faith in Congress: contempt for the rule of law, a secret backroom deal, and self-enrichment. This Republican senator slush fund is yet another example of the corruption that has taken hold here.
Congressman James Walkinshaw, Democrat from Virginia, on the House floor. Congressman Austin Scott, Republican from Georgia, also spoke in support of the bill.
There's been a lot said in the last few minutes. Let's be clear. Senate Democrat leadership knew about the language as well as House Republican leadership. Senate Republican leadership. Both sides knew about this language. Nobody in the House supported this language. This language did not go through any committee in the Senate, did not go through any committee in the House, and could never be passed and signed into law if it was discussed openly where the American citizens could actually see and understand what was happening. We were given a choice the other day: open the government or keep the government closed. The people on my side of the aisle almost unanimously voted to open the government, and I'm glad that we ended the chaos, Mr. Speaker. I want you to know that, because if the Democrats had had that way, the chaos would be ensuing today. But there's a provision in this bill that in my time in office, I believe is probably the most self-centered, self-serving piece of language that I have ever seen in any piece of legislation. And for the people who are saying it's 500,000, I want the American citizens to know this. It's not 500,000. It's 500,000 per account, per occurrence. We have one senator, who maintains that this provision is good and is currently saying that he is going to sue for tens of millions of dollars. I believe my side did the right thing in voting to open up the government.
Congressman Austin Scott, Republican from Georgia, on the House floor today. The House will be voting on this bill tonight. It is expected to pass and then be sent to the Senate. Punchbowl News reporter Andrew Desiderio writing on X, the Senate Republican lunch, as expected, focused a lot on the government funding provision allowing senators to sue if their records are obtained. Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, was the only one in the room defending it, essentially taking over the meeting while Senator Thune, the majority leader, was at the podium per attendees. That post from reporter Andrew Desiderio from Punchbowl News. After that private lunch, the Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, met with reporters and was asked about this.
You had a conversation during lunch about what you're going to do with this provision that allows senators to sue. Have you decided what you're going to do when the House sends that bill over to rescind that provision?
Well, we had a good conversation about that, and we'll have, I'm sure, a more fulsome conversation. Obviously, we'll see what the House does, but I will tell you that that was a Senate-specific solution. The statute that was violated applied only to the Senate, which is why we addressed it the way that we did. We strengthened that provision when it comes to allowing a federal government agency, the Justice Department in this case, to collect information, private information on individual senators. We think that's a violation of separation of powers under the Constitution. Obviously, Jack Smith violated the law in the way he went about that. This is something that needed to be addressed, and we'll see what the House does. And then we'll find out what our colleagues here in the Senate want to do. One thing I can tell you is there is a high level of interest in addressing the weaponization of the federal government, in this case the Biden Justice Department, against Article 1 members of our government here in the United States Senate.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, meeting with reporters today in the U.S. Capitol building. Fox News writing an article about this provision. It came in response to subpoenas made public by Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican from Iowa, that showed former special counsel Jack Smith sought phone records for 10 Republican senators in 2022 as part of the FBI's sweeping Arctic frost investigation into President Donald Trump's alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election. The revelation led Republicans to decry the subpoenas as illegal and intrusive, and Arctic frost as worse than the Watergate scandal. That was from a Fox News article. USA Today writing that before a packed courtroom, former FBI Director James Comey sat motionless as a judge posed critical questions about the case brought against him during a November 19th hearing, homing in on whether the case is a vindictive prosecution and whether the prosecution even secured a valid indictment. U.S. District Judge, who was appointed by President Joe Biden, didn't rule out whether to throw out the case from the bench of his polished Alexandria courtroom, saying the issues were too weighty and too complex for a same-day decision. However, his questions during the hearing signaled concern that President Donald Trump's own statements may demonstrate the case was unlawfully politicized. Reporting from USA Today, the U.S. House debated two bills to overturn portions of the District of Columbia's public safety laws. One would reinstate a cash bail system in D.C. for defendants awaiting trial. D.C. got rid of cash bail back in 1992. The other would change D.C. police disciplinary procedure and when officers can review body camera footage. Here is Congressman James Comer, Republican from Kentucky, chair of the committee that oversees Washington, D.C., about that cash bail bill.
Cashless bail allows dangerous, violent criminals on our streets. For far too long, dangerous criminals have been allowed to roam the streets of Washington, D.C., posing a threat to the general public. Progressive activist judges are currently allowed to release criminals to D.C. streets with only a promise that they will not reoffend and will return to court for their trial date. The D.C. Cash Bail Reform Act would take away a judge's ability to release these violent criminals. It would require judges to hold anyone charged with a violent crime before trial, and it would impose cash bail or bail bonds on anyone charged with a range of public safety or law and order offenses. This is a smart and long overdue reform that rectifies the ill-conceived policies currently enacted in the district. I urge all of my colleagues to support this common sense public safety bill, and I thank Representative Stefanik for her leadership on this issue and the National Fraternal Order of Police for their support.
Congressman James Comer, Republican from Kentucky, on the House floor. Washington, D.C.'s congressional delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton, a Democrat, defended the district's no cash bail policy.
Last year, violent crime in D.C. was down 35%, reaching an over 30-year low. This year, violent crime in D.C. is down 38%. Compared with the same period last year. I suspect most of my Republican colleagues do not know that D.C.'s longstanding pretrial release and detention law is substantially the same as the longstanding federal pretrial release and detention law, or that the same well-respected federal agency provides pretrial services for both local and federal trial courts in D.C. This bill requires, in the case of certain crimes, pretrial detention based solely on a charge and financial conditions for pretrial release. However, mandatory pretrial detention based solely on a charge is unconstitutional, and financial conditions for pretrial release criminalize poverty.
Washington, D.C.'s congressional delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton, a Democrat, on the House floor today. She also said that this bill was a violation of D.C. residents' right to pass laws as they see fit without Congress overturning them, and that the bill is another example of why D.C. should become a U.S. state with full voting representation in Congress. The House expected to vote and pass this bill tonight. President Trump signed executive orders in August to withhold federal grant funding to states and local jurisdictions that have a cashless bail policy and move criminal defendants in D.C. into federal custody to ensure that they'll be held in prison before their trials. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Democracy. It isn't just an idea, it's a process shaped by leaders elected to the highest offices and entrusted to a select few with guarding its basic principles. It's where debates unfold, decisions are made, and the nation's course is charted. Democracy in real time. This is your government at work. This is C-SPAN, giving you your democracy unfiltered.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast wherever you find your podcasts and on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. Article from Politico: 2 House Republicans vowed Wednesday to pressure Speaker Mike Johnson and GOP leaders to advance a bill banning congressional stock trading in the coming weeks, not content to settle for a mere hearing on the topic. Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania said at a press conference outside the House Administration Committee hearing room where academics were preparing to testify about the ins and outs of current stock trade ethics enforcement, a bill will come to the floor. And Congressman Tim Burchett of Tennessee chimed in, "This is a fist fight, folks." That was from Politico. There were also a few Democrats at that news conference. They've been supporting the ban on member stock trading, including Pramila Jayapal of Washington State and Seth Magaziner of Rhode Island. C-SPAN covered that news conference. You can find the video at cspan.org. We also covered the hearing, and here's part of that. Congressman Brian Stile, Republican from Wisconsin, chair of the House Administration Committee, questioning one of the witnesses, James Copeland from the Manhattan Institute.
What can we do to accomplish the ultimate goal of making sure that members of Congress aren't profiting from inside information? And I sometimes go back and think about the situation that occurred here 5 years ago. And on February 13, 2020, as we're heading into the COVID pandemic, the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee called his stockbroker and sold all but one equity in his entire portfolio for a tune of $1.6 million. If you're the chair of the Intelligence Committee, almost by definition, you have information that's not available to the public. And at an absolute minimum, that's an appearance of impropriety. The SEC and others looked into this, and their challenge, of course, is can you prove this beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a standard for prosecution under insider trading. And so then we have to look and explore what reforms need to be made to make sure that this type of action doesn't happen again. Mr. Copeland, in your testimony, you stated that no member of Congress has ever been prosecuted under the Stock Act. We just talked about the instance that took place in the Senate. Why do you think that's the case, that no prosecutions have come under the Stock Act?
Partly for the burden of proof you talked about. I mean, reasonable doubt is relatively high. You have to have a scienter requirement or a knowledge requirement. Also, the way the Stock Act structured is it's a self-policing. In other words, you have your own House and Senate committees in charge of this. Now, there may be good reasons for that. Conflict among the branches is something you have to worry about. You have to worry about an executive branch run by one party going after the members or senators of another party and things like this.
We've seen that plenty of times.
But that's my hypothesis. I wouldn't infer from the lack of prosecutions that nothing bad's happened, right? So.
But I would completely agree with you that from the lack of prosecutions, it's not because nothing bad has happened, it's because the standard for insider trading is incredibly high to prove. It happens on occasion. There are members that have been charged and convicted of insider trading. Under the Stock Act, we're looking for Congress to police itself without the traditional apparatus of a judicial process.
James Copeland, Manhattan Institute Senior Fellow and Director of Legal Policy, questioned by Congressman Brian Stile, Republican from Wisconsin, chair of the House Administration Committee at today's hearing. The Stock Act stands for Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge Act. It was passed in 2012, requiring members of Congress and other government officials to publicly disclose stock trades and personal mortgages in a timely manner, and also applied insider trading bans to them. More from the hearing. Congressman Joseph Morelli, Democrat from New York, is the ranking member. He expanded the scope beyond Congress, asking another witness, Dan Savvikis from the Taxpayer Protection Alliance, about President Trump.
Would you agree that the President of the United States has an even greater ability to affect the American economy and the global stock market?
I would agree it is at least on par. I wouldn't compare the co-equal branches as you mentioned in your opening statement. I think they're on the same level.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I'm not sure that most people would think that the President of the United States is on equal par with any single rank and file member of Congress, but if that's your testimony.
Sure, I should have clarified. I think as Congress as a whole.
Gotcha. So I would take your analysis that elected officials' ability to enrich themselves according to the interests of their stock portfolio, as opposed to what may be in the best interests of the American people, that risk would extend to the president as well?
I would agree.
Gotcha. I have an article here, which I do want to ask in just a moment for to be included with a unanimous consent, but the president invested in media merger his administration controls. It reported that on September 19th, just 2 months ago, the president bought up to $1 million in Warner Brothers Discovery bonds, giving him a personal financial interest in the company. Several media outlets, including the New York Post, which I would argue is a pretty conservative publication, report that the president has privately signaled his strong support of Paramount's bid to buy Warner Brothers Discovery, a merger that, if successful, would increase the price of the Warner Brothers bonds and result in a significant profit for the president. This on the back of other corporate bond purchases made by the president, including Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, Boeing, and United Health during his presidency. So, Mr. Savvikis, it is clear the president has a unique ability to affect the U.S. and global economy, and he has the power to influence these companies' bottom lines. Would you say that the American people could view actions like the president's or any other person who was president, not the specific one who took those, as a significant conflict of interest?
I would agree.
Questions from Congressman Joseph Morelli, Democrat from New York, ranking member on the House Administration Committee, to a witness, Dan Savigas, Taxpayers Protection Alliance, Policy and Government Affairs Vice President. Punchbowl News writing that one of the Republican sponsors of the bill to ban members' stock trading, Anna Paulina Luna of Florida, has a discharge petition ready to force the Speaker's hand if the House Administration panel doesn't immediately move to mark up the Restore Trust in Congress Act. Luna is willing to move ahead if she doesn't see enough progress. House Majority Leader Steve Scalise told us he wants to get something done this year through the committee process. This is Washington Today. From Associated Press, the flight disruptions during the record government shutdown that ended last week inspired a rare act of bipartisanship in Washington on Tuesday, when congressional representatives from both parties introduced legislation that would allow air traffic controllers to get paid during future shutdowns. The bill proposes funding salaries, operating expenses, and other Federal Aviation Administration programs by tapping into a little-used fund with $2.6 billion that was created to reimburse airlines if the government commandeers their planes and they are damaged. That's the article from Associated Press. One of the sponsors, Congressman Troy Nehls, Republican of Texas, chair of the Aviation Subcommittee, spoke about it today at the Honeywell Aviation Summit.
Just look at the airports, look at everything that took place across our country, and the American people were upset, and they should have been mad, because we can't get our act together in Congress. Too much politics up here. We got to do what's right for the American people. So we come up with this idea. We said, you know what? This can never happen again. Just because Congress can't get their act together, and they act like children at times, why should the American people suffer as a result? So there's a pot of money, about $2.6 billion in this insurance fund. It's been there since 9/11. The airlines were contributing to it. I'm sure Administrator Bedford, they were contributing to this, but now the insurance, everything is stable now. So what we're trying to say is we're going to introduce legislation. We're working with the administration, make sure we do this right. Work with the administration that says, should government ever shut down again, that we continue to keep the ATC controllers, keep them paid, keep them up in those towers to make sure that we can have a safe aviation industry while Congress is trying to do these negotiations.
Congressman Troy Nehls, Republican from Texas, chair of the Aviation Subcommittee of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, today at the Honeywell Aviation Summit happening in Washington, D.C. The Senate Subcommittee on Aviation, Space, and Innovation held a hearing today about the government shutdown and its impact on air travel. Ranking Democrat Tammy Duckworth of Illinois asked witness Nick Daniels, president of the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, their union, about the controllers working without pay during the recent shutdown.
Mr. Daniels, you noted that for the first time in history, and you just said you commend Secretary Duffy and FAA administrator for finding a way to keep the Air Traffic Controller Academy open and keep training. In your conversations with them during the shutdown, did you ask them to find a way to also pay air traffic controllers since they found a way to keep the academy going?
I did not specifically have that request of them during it, but it was loud and clear that paying air traffic controllers is essential.
So it was, you commend them for keeping their academies going, but you didn't actually ask them to pay the air traffic controllers. I mean, if DOD, if FAA can continue hiring and training air traffic controllers because of failing to do so would risk the imminent loss of life or loss of personal property, surely there's a case to be made for paying air traffic controllers from reprogrammed funds or even donations from industry. I mean, if DOD can use funds that Congress authorized and appropriate for R&D and not salaries and expenses, along with accepting a billionaire's donation of over $100 million to pay military men and women, what stops FAA from following suit and reprogramming funds from accounts like the Airport and Airways Trust Fund to pay air traffic controller salaries or solicit donations from industry? Did you have a conversation about using those funds to pay the air traffic controllers, which I would have supported?
I did not have a specific conversation as what you're referencing, but I'll put my request on record from now on in the future. I welcome any chance to pay air traffic controllers for the work that they're doing, and they should never go uncompensated for the work that's being done or used as a political pawn in a political dispute.
Right. I think that's what's happening today, is that you're being used as a political pawn. When this hearing was advised, it was called the damage of the Democratic shutdown. I have been the strongest supporter of air traffic controllers. I think you should have been paid. I think that we should have caught up Senator Moran's bill or Senator Cruz's bill. We could have passed it and you should have been paid. It is unconscionable that we had at least one death by suicide that I heard of an air traffic controller in the shutdown. This is not acceptable in our nation. But what is happening today is political theater to use you guys as pawns to score points post-shutdown.
Senator Tammy Duckworth, Democrat from Illinois, ranking member on the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Subcommittee on Aviation, Space, and Innovation, questioning witness Nick Daniels, president of the National Air Traffic Controllers Association. The chair of the subcommittee, Jerry Moran, Republican from Kansas, asked another witness, the president of the Airlines for America trade group, Chris Sununu, about what to expect this holiday season.
Many Kansans will travel for the holiday. What do the airlines expect to be the circumstances those Kansans and Americans will face?
As we go into the holiday, it's going to be full. It's going to be packed. The airlines are ready. The air traffic controllers are back. The skies are safe. So that's the great news. We want everyone to feel confident, first and foremost, about booking travel. But it'll be near record numbers, which is great. Looking into the Christmas season, we're hoping that those bookings pick up a little bit. I think some of the stories in October and some of the just the politics around what was happening at the airlines scared a few people off, so we want them to know more than anything that while it is going to be busy, the airlines and the system is ready. And it's more affordable than ever before, right? It's a better customer experience than ever before, more affordable domestically than ever before, more reliable now that we're out of the shutdown. And as an industry, we're looking to that end of January mark. That's the thing that scares us the most. But right now, we feel very confident about where things are and where they should be through the holidays.
Chris Sununu at today's Senate Aviation Subcommittee hearing. He is the head of Airlines for America trade group, questioned by Senator Jerry Moran, Republican from Kansas, the chair of the subcommittee. Wall Street today, the Dow up 47, NASDAQ up 131, S&P up 21. The headline at CNBC, stocks close higher, snapping losing streak at NVIDIA as NVIDIA rebounds ahead of earnings report. E&E Daily from Politico writing, the House on Tuesday voted to overturn a slew of Biden administration land protections through the rule-busting Congressional Review Act. The House passed S.J. Res. 80 from Senator Dan Sullivan, Republican from Alaska, to axe former President Joe Biden's decision to withdraw millions of acres from production in Alaska's National Petroleum Reserve. Three moderate Democrats, Jim Costa of California, Henry Cuellar of Texas, and Vicente Gonzalez of Texas, crossed the aisle to vote yes. Legislation passed the Senate last month with support from Pennsylvania Democrat John Fetterman and now heads to President Donald Trump. That was from E&E Daily. Here's some of the debate on Tuesday on the House floor before the vote. Congressman Nick Begich is a Republican from Alaska.
Alaska is asking us to act. The Inupiat people who live in the area have spoken, and they could not have been clearer. Through the North Slope Regional Trilateral, the Inupiat Community of the Arctic Slope, the North Slope Borough, and the Arctic Slope Regional Corporation, we have heard that the Biden administration's 2022 plan imposed, quote, sweeping restrictions that curtail responsible development, undermine congressional intent, and disregard the well-being of the people who depend on these lands for both subsistence and livelihoods, end quote. These communities are located in an area nearly the size of Minnesota with no highway connections, extreme transportation costs, and a cost of living among the highest in the nation. Oil and gas development funds their schools, their public safety, their utilities, their clinics, basic services that most Americans assume their local government can provide. But on the North Slope, that stability exists because responsible development exists, and we have a duty to ensure that it continues. Alaska's business community stands with them. The Alaska Support Industry Alliance, representing 547 companies and 35,000 Alaskan workers, warned that the 2022 plan jeopardizes the jobs and investment their families depend on. National organizations from the National Federation of Independent Businesses to the American Exploration and Production Council to the American Petroleum Institute have also voiced their support for reversing this restrictive rule. And the administration itself has made clear that restoring access to the NPRA is a priority. President Trump's Executive Order 14153, Unleashing Alaska's Extraordinary Resource Potential, directs the Secretary of the Interior to review and rescind the 2022 decision and reestablish a balanced framework consistent with the 2020 plan. This statement of administration policy strongly supports this resolution. Mr. Speaker, Alaska is ready to power America. We are ready to help lower energy costs for families and small businesses. We are ready to strengthen national security by reducing our reliance on foreign nations. And the people who live in Alaska's far north, the people whose ancestors have called the region home for 10,000 years, are asking us to restore the balanced, lawful management framework that they helped shape.
Congressman Nick Begich, Republican from Alaska, on the House floor on Tuesday, a bill that would overturn a Biden administration rule to remove land from production in Alaska's National Petroleum Reserve. Congressman Jared Huffman, Democrat from California, ranking member on the Natural Resources Committee, spoke against the bill.
The legislation before us today would withdraw a smart and well-thought-out plan to balance conservation and development in the NPRA. The 2022 NPRA plan was developed over more than a decade of engagement with a variety of stakeholders, scientists, experts, indigenous communities, NGOs, and industry. It aimed to limit the disruption and ecological harm from existing oil and gas development while also designating special areas to protect habitat for the many species that call this amazing place home. I respect that there are a variety of views on how to manage our nation's public lands, but it won't be possible for future administrations to incorporate feedback and comments on proposed actions in the NPRA if Congress approves the resolution before us today. The CRA, as we've said several times in the course of this debate, is a blunt instrument. It would prevent BLM from ever issuing a substantially similar replacement. And so this path would strip local land managers of the ability to respond to on-the-ground changes and needs for the future of the NPRA. My friends across the aisle, you don't need to do this. There are already processes in place for administrations to propose new management decisions if you don't like this plan. And the Trump administration is doing just that already, pursuing updates to the land management plans that we've been debating here using these standard inclusive mechanisms that allow for public input. Interior Secretary Burgum withdrew conservation protections for the NPRA in July. And just last week, the Interior Department finalized a new rule that overturned the previous plan. The Congressional Review Act is simply the wrong tool to address any changes to management of these lands, and it's not even necessary. So why do my Republican colleagues need to take up our valuable floor time here debating a rule that their friends in the administration have already rescinded?
Congressman Jared Huffman, Democrat from California, on the House floor on Tuesday. The House went on to pass this bill. 216 to 209 was the vote. The Senate previously passed it, so it does head to President Trump to be signed into law. CRA is the Congressional Review Act. It allows Congress to nullify executive branch regulations with a simple majority vote, not a supermajority, as long as the president doesn't veto it. Other CRA bills passed on Tuesday would repeal the Biden administration's restrictions in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and coal mining leasing in Wyoming. These bills now head to the Senate. Associated Press reporting from Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, Melania Trump and Usha Vance took their first trip together Wednesday, spending time with North Carolina service members and their families to show appreciation for their service and sacrifice with the holidays approaching. The wives of President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance, a former Marine, visited with military personnel at Camp Lejeune, the largest Marine Corps base on the East Coast, and Marine Corps Air Station New River, which is in the same area. That was from AP. One of their stops as well was Lejeune High School. Melania Trump spoke in the gym to students, parents, and teachers who are putting together care packages for service members who are stationed away from home.
So Usha and I just visited Dr. Olson's AP research class. We talked about presidential AI challenge. They were fantastic, and they represented Lejeune High School very well. So we must be very proud of them. I want to thank you, all of you, because you and military families are behind our nation's defense. And thank you for your service. My husband, the president, is sending best regards. We are both thinking of you, and you're in our thoughts and prayers for holidays every day, but especially for the holidays. And I see here you packed care packages for some of the loved ones, but for other service members. So thank you for that. It's exciting to be here, and I'm sure Usha is happy to be here with us as well. I want to wish you a very wonderful Thanksgiving and safe Thanksgiving. And thank you for your service. To all of you, you're part of it. And I hope if you ever come in the White House, you are invited. Please let us know, and we are there. Happy Thanksgiving.
First Lady Melania Trump at Lejeune High School in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Also on the trip, Second Lady Usha Vance. They also visited a local elementary school and met with military service members and their families. And finally, on C-SPAN Radio's Washington Today, a member of the British Parliament from Scotland, Torquil Crichton, asked Prime Minister Keir Starmer jokingly today about whether President Donald Trump had any hotel recommendations in New Jersey. The context was that Scotland qualified for the 2026 World Cup soccer or football tournament being co-hosted by the U.S., Canada, and Mexico.
When the Prime Minister next meets with the President of the United States, can he ask him if he knows any reasonably priced hotels near the MetLife Stadium in New Jersey, where the World Cup final is to be held? And as we are about to provide the biggest boost to whisky exports since our trade deal was signed, can he ask the Chancellor to gently consider excise duties next week so we Scots can continue celebrating at reasonable prices?
Prime Minister. I thank him for his question. On the question of whisky, it is important that we do everything we can to support whisky. I'm really pleased with the progress we're making with the United States and, of course, with India as well under the trade deal. I'll continue to discuss what more we can do with him.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer getting a question from a Member of Parliament from Scotland, Torquil Crichton, during Prime Minister's Question Time in the British House of Commons today in London. Scotland qualified for the World Cup on Tuesday for the first time since 1998 with a 4-2 win over Denmark. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.